And the theme of his radio show is right thinking from the left coast. He's also a regular fill-in on the national syndicated Mike Levin show. And prior to his radio career, Brian was regarded as one of the nation's top meteorologists and science reporters. His book, Climate Gate, a veteran meteorologist exposes the global warming scam, was released on the Sean Hannity show and immediately became a bestseller. His current book, which he said, if I'm going to introduce him, I've got to say this, which he's selling and signing today, ECO-Tyranny, How the Left's Green Agenda Will Dismantle America. And some of the things that Brian's going to talk about today is what would the founders say about the genesis of the environmental movement, how the Obama administration is working behind the scenes to accomplish the radical goals of the UN, in other words, defeat Obama. We've got to do that. Obama's secret plan for a 140 million acre private land heist, and what the Founding Fathers intended in terms of land use and national parks. This is Brian and his wife's first visit to the wonderful state of New Hampshire. Let us stand and give them a real New Hampshire welcome.
Take away from that, Cliff. Cliff's last words to me as we're handing off the mic here, he says, "Good luck." So if I start to bomb, does that mean tomatoes are going to fly at me? What's going to happen here? Heavier things. I got a hammer up here and I know how to use it, okay? Hey, this hammer, just remember, I work in the belly of the beast, folks, San Francisco, right? Nancy Pelosi country, Barbara Boxer country, Dianne Feinstein country. Yeah, let me tell you something. So I'm battle hardened. I'm battle tested. I'm ready to roll here. I'm excited. Greetings from the formerly great state of California. Condolences. It's quite a state of confusion. Please, and my beautiful wife of so many years, and yes, she was my teenage sweetheart, and still is. I love her story. You know, my family immigrated to the United States, and you know, I'm very proud of that. But you ask her, a family, so when did your family come to America? She will tell you, well, they never came to America. They founded America. And that's her story, both sides of her family. It's really a neat story. Her great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, David Rittenhouse, made the spectacles for Benjamin Franklin. And she also, the other side of the family's name is Gates, a controversial general in the Revolutionary War. Horatio. So she is a daughter of the Revolution, ladies and gentlemen. And she is at home in the great state of New Hampshire. I mean, think about this. Okay, here's the problem in California. We have 1/8 of the United States population. Okay, we've got 1/8 of the population. We have 1/3 of all welfare recipients. Okay, that's not a joke. Well, it is a joke. It's sad. It's tragic. But that's the truth. California is just going off a cliff. I mean, that's why I always tell my audience on a regular basis, I thank God for what's happening in Greece, because it should be California's warning. It really should be the warning for the entire United States of America. But I love, see, when we got the invitation to come here, we really wanted to come because live free or die. I mean, that's awesome. You ask most people in California, what's the motto of the state of California? Get taxed and get high? Whoa, all right. Hey, marijuana is legal in the state of California. there are more medicinal marijuana facilities than there are filling stations. I mean, they're everywhere. And all you have to do, you're 18 years of age, I'm not making this up, 18 years of age, I got a headache. Just go there, there will be a real doctor who will write you a prescription, and you can use marijuana for the rest of your life, and you will not get busted for it. Just simple, a hangnail, got a hangnail, really bothers me. Okay, here's your little prescription for the dope. If you get caught without a medicinal marijuana card, it's a mere $100 fine, that's all. It's just a $100 fine. So dope is legal in our state. The other thing is, we have this tax rate. I know that's a foreign concept to you in terms of state income tax. If you make $47,000 a year in California, $47,000 a year, you're taxed 9.3%. That's incredible. And we have a state sales tax of 8.5% at the minimum. The other cities, it will vary and be a little bit higher. So do you realize if I decided, and I can do this, I could broadcast my radio show from anywhere in the country and my audience would never know it. When I fill in for Mark Levin, I'm literally down in my basement and on a national radio show talking to 5 million people. I could bring my show to New Hampshire. We could do this. Raise right off the bat. Oh my gosh. Okay, but the state of California, the motto is actually Eureka, which means I found it. Now, it's kind of interesting because I'm not sure why they decided that would be our motto. Maybe, I don't know. But it really works well. Because if you go back to the Greek story of how the term Eureka was first used, it had to do with Archimedes and this discovery involving gold, and he was so excited with his discovery he ran through the streets of Syracuse naked, yelling, Eureka! Eureka! And I'm thinking the naked part works in California. because in California, well, in San Francisco, this is the truth, okay? You can walk freely about San Francisco, pure butt naked. The only requirement is you're not allowed into a restaurant, and you can, if you're going to sit on a park bench or a bus stop bench, you have to bring your own towel to sit down on. Okay, this town is nuts, but I enjoy driving the liberals crazy, and I do every morning between 5 and 9, and it's just an absolute blast. You know, the other thing that I love. You can ask my wife, I was fascinated. I'm in the hotel room and I flushed the toilet. And it says, whoosh. And I'm watching this, it's 5 gallons of water going down the drain. I haven't seen, those toilets were outlawed in California years ago. 5 gallons of water. And in San Francisco, what they have a rebate program, and they've had this for a long time. You know, they give you $100 if you get rid of your old toilet to get the 1.6 gallon flusher. And then when they thought, oh no, we'll give $100 now to get the 1.2 gallon flusher. The problem is, you have to flush those things 3 or 4 times anyway to get your business down the drain. And now the crazy thing is that San Francisco, they have spent millions of dollars having to redo the sewer system because there's not enough water flowing when people flush their stuff. Gee whiz. The World Series a couple years ago, there's the World Series, and it's nationally televised, and it's the Giants and the Rangers, and some of the commentators said, it must be a low tide, it really smells bad out here. It was not a low tide, it was a damn sewer problem they have in San Francisco. Oh. So my deal is, you know, I'm a meteorologist by trade, and I was a TV meteorologist for many years. And even worked part-time on the CBS morning show with Harry Smith on CBS nationally. Nobody watched the program then. I don't think anybody watches it now. But I was doing that way back in the day, and I had a ball doing television weather. But something happened. There was a conversation. I've gotten so far off my nose at this point. It makes me just terrible. I love to tell stories. So there's Al Gore. Al Gore is coming to San Francisco. And this is when he was vice president. And we had this weather phenomenon on the West Coast called El Nino. It impacts weather patterns throughout the entire Northern Hemisphere. No one knows why it occurs, but it does, and it really screws up the weather. It has nothing to do with global warming, but Al Gore said it did. So Al Gore was going to come to California for a big conference on El Nino, and he wanted to tie it into global warming. So the station says, okay, we're sending you down to Santa Barbara for this event, and you'll front the coverage on our news, and this is great, right? You know, I mean, El Nino is huge, you talk about it every night. And then this global warming tie-in, I mean, this is fascinating. So you'll be the guy to tell everybody about this. I said, hold on. There's not a credible meteorologist on the planet who would try to tie El Nino into global warming. There's not one. Even the hardy global warming enthusiasts would never go there. I'm not doing it either. So we have this argument in the newsroom, and it's getting kind of testy. And this executive producer, again, I'm working for a CBS-owned station. Okay, this is a big, fourth largest television market in the country. The executive producer comes up and he says, Brian, you know what your problem is? You don't know which facts to leave out. Okay, that hurt. That hurt. And that's when I started thinking, you know, is this really what I want to do the rest of my life? It's because I'm getting these continual assaults on this global warming thing. And it just wasn't resting well with me. And so I decided to make the move into talk radio. And I did that in 2001, had my first opportunity to do talk radio on 9/11 in 2001. And boy, there was a lot to talk about on that day for starters. But Al Gore, my website is debatemealgore.com. He hasn't taken me up on the offer yet. He won't take anybody off on the offer yet because he doesn't want to debate this issue. Al Gore is essentially, he's a front man for this entire movement. And it's a movement where there's a lot of money to be made. A lot of money to be made. And so Al Gore is at the forefront of the movement as essentially the tout to make sure that people keep believing that there's this dire emergency so that all the companies he's invested in will have an opportunity to make money off of this scam. For example, I'll just think of one. Oh, I could mention Solyndra. And by the way, I was the first guy to ever write about Solyndra because I used to drive by this unbelievable. Thank you. In 2007. My wife and I would drive by on Interstate 880 this unbelievable factory that said Solyndra on it. I always wondered, what is this? Solyndra. And so I asked a friend of mine who's in the venture capital community in the Silicon Valley, what is this? He said, oh, you haven't heard Solyndra? Oh, Brian, this is just an amazing story. So he starts talking to me about all the people that are invested in this and how it was the most capitalized startup in the history of the Silicon Valley. They raised $1 billion in private equity. More money than HP, more money than Google, more money than Apple, more money than eBay had ever raised. And they burned through it like nobody's business. So now they're looking for another sucker to try to get to the next round of funding, and that sucker was Uncle Sam. So I'm learning about this, and then I wrote a piece on human events, and then members of Congress took notice, and now you know the rest of the story with Solyndra. But that Solyndra factory, if you were to drive by it, I did the math on it, and I write about it extensively in ECO-Tyranny. That thing cost over $1,000 a square foot to build. It's just a warehouse. That's not including the equipment in the place. $1,000 a square foot. This is the kind of stuff that they're doing to us on a regular basis. And you know, some of Al Gore's buddies were heavily invested in that company. But Al Gore is one of these guys. I mean, he's continually telling us that the global warming scenario is going to destroy all species on the planet. In fact, he was before Congress just last month saying, oh, global warming scenario, it's even worse than previously predicted. So I'm thinking, okay, what's worse than we're going to all fry to death and die? Is it going to be humid too? I mean, is that where he's going? Al Gore. So we got the big election. This is going to be critical on so many levels. You know, we've already found out what you get when you give a liberal a penny for his thoughts. Change. Change. And it's the kind of change that's more in keeping with Marx than Madison. Okay, that's what we're getting. That's the plumb line in this particular election. We all know this. But when you see what Barack Obama's EPA is trying to do behind the scenes, I mean, folks, I get on these conference calls on a regular basis with Lisa Jackson, and any of you can, and I do. all they talk about, each one of these conference calls at the EPA, is environmental justice. Environmental justice. It's a big shakedown operation, the likes of which Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton or Saul Alinsky would love. They just target businesses, industries, companies, and they lawsuit them to death, take that money, and then give it either to the lawyers or to the poor. This is what they're doing, environmental justice on a daily basis. So if Barack Obama proves to us what you get when you give a liberal a penny for his thoughts, what does Joe Biden prove? I wish there was a punchline for this other than to say the people in Delaware must be the most stupid people on the planet. How can they constantly, how does this guy, put y'all in chains was his last one. We're going to put y'all in chains. How does he get away with this stuff? I have this Joe Biden gaffe reel that I play on the radio on a regular basis. It just goes on and on and on. See, 2 Saturdays ago, Biden and Obama decided they'd play a little golf, which is just amazing to me. I mean, you know, we got 2 wars. Things aren't going very well overseas these days. Can anybody in here articulate for me the Obama administration foreign policy? Can we? Everybody knew what the Bush doctrine was. What's the Obama doctrine?
They don't have one.
They don't have one. We got guys dying over there, getting blown up. I don't even know what we're doing over there anymore. And yet somehow this guy, economy's in the tank. We're looking more like Greece all the time. Yet somehow this guy has time to play golf. It's even during an election. So Obama and Biden are playing golf. 2 Saturdays ago. Now, Biden's handicap is probably like mine. It's about 20. Obama's handicap is Biden.
Yeah.
Took a long time to get to that punchline, but we got there. Now, did you hear this? This is breaking news. Did you hear about the reporter that finally asked Obama and Biden a difficult question? Neither did I. That ain't happening anytime soon. And you saw, of course, you did see the Newsweek cover article, right? Hit the road, Barack. Okay, I got the inside story there. That's a one-time deal. The next issues, they're just going to hammer that out of Romney and out of Ryan. It's just they're one little peace offering, make themselves look viable. I mean, nobody's reading that magazine anymore. And it's just going to be one hit job after the next in the coming weeks from that news magazine. And so predictable, just so predictable. Now you got ABC News doing a special on Romney's religion. NBC doing a special on the Mormon Church. See, this is where they're going right to the gutter because they have nothing to run on at this point in time. I've been following and interviewing some of the special ops guys that have been coming out with a lot of harsh things to say about this administration, especially ticked off because they can't believe. I had one friend of mine who's a Navy SEAL. When he heard that it was SEAL Team 6 involved in that raid, my friend said, Brian, no one should ever know that that was even a Navy SEAL job. He said, the stuff we do all over the world is supposed to be secret. He said, I'm sworn to deniability. I'm not sworn to anything less. Deniability. He said, no one should know about this. Just outrage. So you're hearing from all these special ops guys now who are just totally blown out over the fact that the President of the United States would not just out SEAL Team 6, but then talk about details of the raid, the mission. And then go beyond that and start to leak other classified information that's putting lives at risk. I mean, this is really serious stuff. So I got to thinking, Obama and Osama, what do these guys have in common? Obama
BS.
and Osama. I'll tell you, well, besides Muslim fathers,
BS.
did you get that? Besides Muslim fathers, they also have friends who bombed the Pentagon.
Yes.
That's what they have in common, and that's why we need to get this guy out of office. You have at least one of your senators is a Republican. I mean, think about me out on the left coast. I've got one boxer. I'm serious. She is not the sharpest tool in the shed. If you ever met her, and I have, she's very nice, but she's She's as thin as a potato chip in terms of, at least from what I can tell, intelligence. She's really not a bright person. She has to read everything she says. I'm doubting if she's the person who writes this stuff. She just reads whatever they put in front of her. I would love to see her. You know, if you could give her a magic genie, you know, deal, 3 wishes. I'm just kind of wondering what she would do. She would say, well, I'd like to be beautiful, and I'd like to be smart, and articulate. Poof! She turns into a conservative. Oh, my governor Moonbeam. Let me tell you about my governor Moonbeam. Thanks. I'll just talk off the top of my head. Here's how criminal this guy is, okay? We have a 2-term limit in the state of California. He already did his term. He did his 2 terms, you know, decades ago. 2-term limit. It's the law. This was passed by the voters. It's a law. So he decides to run for a 3rd term, and the way he conveniently gets out of this, and the media's right there with him. Oh, yeah, okay. He says, well, that law was passed after I was governor. What difference does that make? And well, of course, the law was passed after he was governor. He's in his 3rd term, and he's ruining the state. We're upside down to the tune of $18 billion in terms of our general fund budget and $53 billion in our overall budget. I mean, he's not doing anything to fix the state. I will tell you, my first book was ClimateGate, as you heard, and I wrote this book because I wanted one-stop shopping for people to read everything they needed to read to stop cap and trade. And the book was released on the Sean Hannity show, and the book went nuts. And I've been told by a number of members of Congress that this book was actually passed around among House membership to help educate people on why they needed to vote against cap and trade. So we had a big victory there, but there are many more victories to come. So I wrote ClimateGate, and as I was researching ClimateGate, you know, again, the subtitle, Veteran Meteorologist Exposes the Global Warming Scam. As I'm reading about ClimateGate, as I'm researching ClimateGate, I started realizing there's a bigger scam here. There's a bigger scam. And it's the entire environmental movement based on a scam. Now listen, we're all for clean water, we're all for clean air, there's no question. Back of the book actually says, it isn't about the environment, let's be clear about that. It's not about the environment. Front of the book also is just so pleased, ECO-Tyranny provides a thought-provoking analysis of the origins of the modern-day sustainable movement. That's from Senator James Inhofe. There's something deeper at play here. And so in my research, I found some really interesting things. The first was that the first environmental crisis ever written about was written about by a friend of Karl Marx. Justice von Liebig was his name. And von Liebig said the biggest environmental crisis the world had ever seen involved the guano trade, bird poop. People in England realized that bird poop could be used as fertilizer, and their crops were really growing well. So von Liebig said this is a travesty. The crops are growing at an unnatural rate. People are going to eat more food. They will have bigger families. Those bigger families will need bigger houses. The forest will be cleared to build those houses. Those people will have more horses. That's all they had for transportation back then. The horses will produce more manure. There will be more livestock. They will produce more manure. There's going to be a pollution problem because of the guano trade that could eventually destroy all species. Okay, that was von Liebig. So Karl Marx reads this stuff and goes, whoa, hold it. He is on to something here. Karl Marx hated capitalism, we all know that. Hated the experiment going on in America. He said, you know what? If we can use environmental crises to scare people, to make them believe that capitalism could do all this and destroy all species, then we'd have them. So this is amazing. One of Karl Marx's disciples, a guy named Lancaster, kept going down this road, took some of Marx's thoughts and developed them further. He went so far as to call humans the insurgent sons of nature. Lancaster has a disciple named Tainsley who thinks, yeah, this is where we got to go. We take this whole concept that capitalism could destroy all species. I need a word, got it. Ecosystem. Ecosystem. One of Marx's essential disciples comes up with the word ecosystem. And this is the truth, folks. He uses the word ecosystem to describe the destructive human activities of the modern world. Okay, so then here's, if I was only going to share one thing with you from my book, I take you to page 31. Let me read this well-written paragraph to you, although I have to disclose this. This paragraph I didn't write. This is from 1883. But inexorably, the time will come when the declining warmth of the sun will no longer suffice to melt the ice thrusting itself forward from the poles, when the human race, crowding more and more about the equator, will finally no longer find even there enough heat for life, when gradually even the last trace of organic life will vanish, and the earth, an extinct globe, frozen like the moon, will circle in deepest darkness and in an ever narrower orbit about the equally extinct sun, and at last fall into it. 1883, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels predicting human-caused climate change. 1883. And the left hasn't left this thing to this very day. They're hanging on to this deal, which was concocted in the mind of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, page 31 of the book ECO-Tyranny. Now, I could spend a lot of time on this, but I won't bother you with it because the details can get kind of deep. But let me just suffice it to say, in the last 150 years, there has been a global warming. It's not as warm as it was several hundred years ago, and we know it's at least 2 degrees warmer than today. And it's not as warm as it was thousands of years ago, when we know, because you and I could go up the Arctic Circle right now, take some shovels, dig through the pristine tundra, and in no time we would probably bump into the carcasses of camels and hyenas and lions. So it tells you weather patterns and the climate has changed. And it was much warmer a long time. But since 1850, it has warmed 0.7 degrees Celsius, about 1.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, that's the truth. 88% of that warming, this is the one that Al Gore does not want you to hear. 88% of that warming occurred before 1940. The hottest decade on records was the 1930s. 22 of our now 50 states established their highest all-time records in the 1930s, including the state of New Hampshire, I believe. So, most of the warming occurred a long time ago. Since 1998, there's been no warming. None. Even the most strident global warming enthusiasts will admit there has been no warming since 1998. So as I always like to say, if you're going to have warming, you better have warming. And as I also like to say, if you're trying to find a cause, can you come up with something better than carbon dioxide? You can't touch it, you can't taste it, you can't see it, you can't smell it, and yet they're telling us it's a toxin. It's 38 1,000ths of 1% of the atmosphere. 38 1,000ths of 1% of the atmosphere, and this used to be on the EPA, the Department of Energy's website. They've since scrubbed it. Of that 38 thousandths of 1%, humankind contribution is 3%. That's it. That's minute. You can't even measure that. You can't conceive a number that small in your mind. I will also tell you this book, and for sake of time, the Boston Herald did a story on me several weeks ago on a Sunday edition, because they were tapping into guys like me. Oh, what do you? And you know, they do this in such an insidious way. So Brian, what do you think Obama's agenda is if he gets another term? And you know, they're thinking I'm a kook with tinfoil on my hat as they're asking me this question, on my head as they ask me the question. I said, well, it's in the back of my book, and I know that's why you're asking me the question, right? Well, yes, we have heard that there's something in your book, but I've never read the book. I said, well, you should read it, and just turn to the back of the book, and you'll see the plan. It's a plan by the Obama administration. I scanned it, we put it in the back of the book, complete with some mastermind's handwritings, of an effort to take over millions of acres of private land and federalize the land. It's in the book. It's a plan. It's a plan that ties into a number of environmentalist schemes to try to rewild America. Or, as John Holdren, Barack Obama's Science and Technology Advisor likes to call it, de-develop North America. So this is their plan. It's in the book. It's frightening. It's just another reason. When you read this plan in the back of the book, your jaw will drop and you say, we cannot allow this guy to have another 4 years, because if he can't get an act of Congress to do this, he'll do just like he did with amnesty. He'll do the backdoor way with an executive order. That's what he'll do. I mean, my gosh, we've got to stop this man before he ruins this country and country. So, as we're walking, we came to town yesterday, came to Boston yesterday. We really wanted to do the Freedom Trail. And so we woke up early, and I'm telling you something, we walked, and we enjoyed. And we took the guided tour, and we did a self-guided tour. We did it all. Our guide on the guided tour was total liberal who was trying to revise history the entire way. But, you know, it's Boston, I guess that's what I'm going to get. But it was a delightful tour. You know, and as we're walking through, we're thinking, the spirit of our founders is crying out from these stones, these bricks, these cobblestone walkways. They're crying out. And it's up to us to do something. And as I speak to groups all over the country, and as I speak to groups in the Bay Area, and you know, brother, I'm not sure where you're from in the former Soviet Union.
Poland.
Poland?
Yes.
But you guys get it, okay? The San Francisco Bay Area has so many people from the Eastern Bloc countries and from Russia, and they're all concerned about this very same thing. They see what's happening, and they'll come to these meetings, and their tears in their eyes are so passionate. They'll say, "Don't you people understand what's happening?" Well, I do. You do. So, in the back of ECO-Tyranny, there's a call to action. There's a 12-point action plan on things that we need to do to shore up things in this nation from an environmental standpoint. One of them includes not just getting rid of the EPA, get rid of the Department of Interior. Give all of that national land. Listen, when you read, and I go through this in the book, our founders did not want the federal government to own or manage land. They did not want that. Because they realized if the federal government owns or manages land, the federal government, a tyrannical government, can withhold the resources from the people. That's exactly what's happening. They did not want the federal government to do that. And I go through the entire history, and it's a fascinating history. A lot of crony capitalism involved, folks. Establishing some of these national parks, like, for example, Yellowstone. That was an inside job, and quite frankly, Ulysses S. Grant was right there in on it. It's a fascinating story. But that was not what was intended. What was intended is for, all of these national parks, in my opinion, should be given back to the states. The states could probably run many of them cash positive and decide what they want to do with the resources. In the state of California, I would tell you what they do. They say, no, we're not touching the resources. Okay, that's the state's right. But there would be other states that say, we want those resources. There are jobs there. That's energy independence. It's part of the 12-point plan. But then I call to action. The signers have always been a particular interest to me. And, you know, we read their names in the Declaration, and we saw when the Declaration was first publicly read yesterday, which was spectacular. But when they put together this declaration, there were, as you remember, we had the signers, and it was 55 or 56. 56 signers. Benjamin Franklin was not married. That means there were 55 wives involved in these discussions. The families were very tight back then. And each of these founders knew, if I put my name on this document, do you realize what's going to happen? They're coming after us. That's why they said, we're willing to give our life, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Some of these men knew that they would immediately be targets for signing that document. And I love John Hancock's signature. It's the biggest. He wanted to send a message to the king. He was kind of a pompous guy anyway. But you know what? That's fine. That's America. You want to be pompous? Be pompous. You want to be Richard and all get out like he was? That's the pursuit of happiness. You want to live in a lean-to in the forest? Go for it. That's the pursuit of happiness. Do whatever you please. Live free or die. Okay? Hancock has the biggest signature because he wanted to send a message to the king. It was kind of his political version of a middle finger, if you will. So I write about some of the founders and their stories. And Richard Stockton is one of the signers. You see these names, you don't even think about what they mean, but Richard Stockton, I mean, this is a guy who, he signs the document and he tries to get to his home in Princeton. And before he could even get home, his wife and children, you know, they're fleeing because the Brits are there. They're looking for Stockton right now. And his poor wife is put in prison, and she's attended to by one of their servants. That's the only way she was able to get a fresh change of clothes or even food. This servant was going back and forth getting stuff to her. A prisoner exchange was accomplished. She was able to get out. Her life was in tatters. She was so sick from her mistreatment and abuse, and poor condition she was living, and she dies. She ends up dying. And the last we hear about Stockton is he goes into he was a very wealthy man, goes into a tremendous depression and dies at the age of 51. That was it. He gave his life, his fortune, his sacred honor for this country. Another story I talk about is Francis Lewis. Francis was a businessman. He came to this country at the age of about 20 from Wales. He establishes a merchant business, and one of his clients is the military. And he finds himself in the French-Indian War. He's on business, and suddenly he's taken captive by the French. And he's shipped over to France in a box, and he's in prison in France for a long time. There's another prisoner exchange. In exchange for his service to the king at this time. This was pre-colonial America. In exchange for his service to the king, he's given 5,000 acres on Long Island. And one would think he would be forever beholden to the king for this gracious gift. But as time goes on, especially with the Stamp Act, he becomes particularly peeved with what the king's doing to the people. It's tyranny. He wanted liberty. So he becomes a signer. No sooner does he sign the document, the king becomes so ticked that he finds out that Francis has actually signed this declaration. He sends warships out to Francis's house off the coast of Long Island, and his wife is standing on the balcony cursing the Brits as they're just offshore firing cannonballs into her house. They end up taking her prisoner as well. And the end is not good. The end is not good. He vanishes into relative obscurity after his wife dies. He gave his life, his fortune, his sacred honor for this country. And then the last story is a guy, you'll see his name, and he is a wonderful man named John Hart. They called him Honest John Hart. Honest John Hart was just a simple guy. He wasn't of any means, but he was just known to be one of the most sincere patriots. He wasn't an orator. He wasn't known for public speaking, just a good, solid guy. And he signs the document, and immediately he goes home. His wife is dying of an illness. His wife dies by his side. He doesn't even have a chance to bury her before the Brits come looking for him. They chase him into the woods. He's being hunted like an animal for an entire year in the woods. He gets home, can't find his wife's body where it's been buried, doesn't know where his children are. His house has been razed, all the buildings leveled, livestock, horses, gone. He, shortly thereafter, his life ends, they say he died of a broken heart. John Hart dies of a broken heart. He was a young man. He gave it all for this country. You'll read those stories in ECO-Tyranny and you'll get the entire history of the environmental movement and this call to action. We've got to end this, okay? This has got to stop. Those founders would look us in the eye and say, what are you doing? life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. It's worth your life, your fortune, and your sacred honor, now more than ever, for not just your sake, but for the sake of your children and the sake of your grandchildren. I don't want my grandkids to look me in the eye someday and say, "You had a radio show in San Francisco. Why didn't you do something?" I'm doing all I can. You're doing all you can. Let's keep doing this for America. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your hospitality. Jamie and I are here together. I'd love to have an opportunity to meet you. We'll sign some books and have you fun. God bless the United States of America. God bless the great state of New Hampshire. Look forward, guys.
Thanks for Brian for coming out.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We'll show you here.
Thank you.
We have an umbrella with the seal of New Hampshire.
Yes, very good.
We have some New Hampshire candy.
Nice, very good, thank you. From the True Nut Company, good.
And maple candy.
Is there a message here? Because I'm like the fruits and nuts, you thought you'd give me.
Oh, maple syrup.
Nice.
Real stuff.
Thank you very much.
And a mug with the seal of New Hampshire.
Great.
And I love New Hampshire.
Thank you. Very good.
Chocolate, so.
That is my new official radio coffee cup right there. Live free or die. I love it.
Concludes the program. So, as they say, network, sign up to volunteer. Drew's in the back there.